This program is brought to you by the Kentucky Small Business Development Center in Louisville. We provide the professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to help you make sound business decisions. Thank you to the U.S. Small Business Administration for co-sponsoring our program and to our host organization, the University of Kentucky. Contact us at 502-625-0123 to get started.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar on Introduction to Importing and Exporting. My name is Amos Izarimana, and I am the Program Manager for the Office for Globalization, which is part of Louisville Forward, the development wing of Louisville Metro Government. Today, we are joined with a number of experts who are here in Louisville that will answer all the questions you have around starting businesses and thinking about selling and purchasing internationally. With us, we have Tony Sears, who is the business coach with Kentucky Small Business Development Center here in Louisville. In the past, she was a project director for Louisville Minority Business Development Center and the director of housing at Sullivan University. In her free time, she likes to support nonprofits that seek to nurture the youth. And Tony today will be sharing with us some of the basics of starting a small business. We also have David Robson, who is a purchasing trade compliance manager at A.D. Ballard Company, and he has worked there for 20 years. In the past, he worked in Tier 1 auto parts industry, and he's married with 3 kids and is an avid runner. So we will go into a panel discussion after hearing from Tony. To learn a little bit more about importing and some of the considerations you need to keep in mind as you think about starting your business or whatever idea you have to start selling or purchasing internationally. Last but not least, we have Brian Miller, who is the Senior International Trade Specialist for the U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service, which is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. He works with a team of experts to assist U.S. companies interested in selling to the worldwide market. Before that, he owned a small manufacturing firm for products he personally developed and patented in mobile electronics, jewelry, and travel goods. He was in the horse racing circuit for 9 years, 5 of which he was an active jockey. Again, welcome Brian, David, and Tony. Just a reminder to keep your mic muted while somebody's speaking so that you don't have any background noise. For our participants, if you have any questions throughout the webinar, feel free to add those in the chat or the Q&A box, and I'll be monitoring those as we go along. Again, I'm gonna turn it over to Tony now to start sort of introducing us to this whole world of small businesses. And if you have an entrepreneurial idea, what do you need to do with it? And what steps do you need to consider before you start doing that? Tony?
Good morning, Amos, and thank you for that introduction. I see some familiar names in our participant box, so I wanted to say hello to Bridget Johnson and also to Kevin Yates, and thank you all for joining us today. Today, I'm going to be discussing the basic steps for starting your business. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get started on that. There we go. So just a little bit about myself. I've been with the Small Business Development Center for quite some time now. I'm not going to age myself. I won't do that. But I have a background in business registration guidance and also helping people with developing their business plan, as well as helping them to get their loan packaging together and helping them with developing that export-import planning. So today, I'm going to talk about the business registration steps, and then also helping you to think about the basic things you want to do for planning, for exporting or importing for your business. So to get started, there's some basic steps that you want to go to complete to register your business, and I'm going to go through these. So first of all, a disclaimer, you want to do these steps before, excuse me, at least 1 month prior to when you think your business will either earn business income, or you're going to pay for a business expense, or your business is going to secure some type of business debt, and you expect to hire or retain an employee. It could do one or more of the following. So the first step is that business name. Once you have decided on a business name, you'll need to see if it's available. And so you can check with your county clerk's office in your area. On the state level, you can go to this website here with the Secretary of State and check the name availability there. If you think your business is going to go national, I highly recommend that you use the U.S. Patent and Trademarks Office website to see if the name is available on a national level as well. Now, you want to select a legal business structure, or sometimes you'll hear them called business entities or business structures, but you need to select one. And we usually tell people to understand that there are tax implications as well as legal implications when doing so. So you want to talk with an accountant or an attorney before making that decision. So you want to take into account some basic things about how will you want to be taxed? Like, do you want it to hit you directly, or do you want it to be separate in a separate legal entity? What type of paperwork are you wanting to have to deal with on a regular basis? How much liability do you want to be responsible for? And then do you want to have the ability to be able to raise capital easily when you're looking into each one of these? And so the state of Kentucky, they basically, look at the sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, and the corporation are the basic business structures. So when you're looking at legal structures, you want to ask yourself, what type of profit or loss will the business incur? How much control do you want in the business? And do you need to reinvest earnings into the business? Now, I'm going to go kind of simply over the different business structures. And feel free to ask questions if you have them. But the sole proprietorship is just you. There's no one else that's involved in the company. Your business assets and your personal assets are basically considered one. There's no separation between you and the company. The same applies to a partnership, but a partnership is 2 or more people that are involved in only this particular business. The sole proprietorship and the partnership have what's called unlimited liability, whereas the partnership is called joint several liability. And what that means is, again, there's no separation between your personal assets and your business assets. On the partnership level, though, if your partner does something to inadvertently hurt hurt someone, that person that's been harmed, they could come after the other partner's assets. That's what's meant by joint several liability. Whereas with the sole proprietor, there's unlimited liability attached there because there's no separation, again, between personal and business. And keep in mind, the sole proprietorship and the partnership, they're not considered what I call a living, breathing entity because there's no separation there. Whereas with the corporation and the limited liability company, those particular entities are considered to be separate legal entities. So what that means is that if the owner or the founder should pass on, the business can still continue. That business has its own personal assets. It has its own insurance. It has its own banking account. It's basically a business identity. Okay, so you want to kind of keep that in mind when you're looking at legal structures. Now, some things that you would need to think about, which are listed here, is what type of profit or loss do you think the business will have? You know, it may make sense to start out very simply in your company if you don't think your business will generate quite a bit of income. So it's easier to start out as a sole proprietor, or in the case of two or more, as a partnership, if you don't think your business will experience a whole lot of litigation and won't have a lot of tax implications, because then you can always move up the ladder, so to speak, of formality. How much control do you want in the business? So if you are a corporation, you may not have as much control as you would as if you were an LLC or a sole proprietorship. So you kind of need to think about that as well. And do you need to reinvest the earnings that you have in the business back into the business so that it can continue to grow? Those type of businesses usually tend to be like your LLCs or your corporations. And then if you want to access cash a little easier out of your company, it may be easier to be a sole proprietor or even a partnership. It just all depends. And that's why we always tell people to talk with an accountant so that you understand the tax implications, and then talk to an attorney so that you understand the legal implications of the business entity you want to select. So for more information on business structures, I've listed some websites here that you can look into to learn more about them. Now, when you want to form your company, you will use, it makes sense to use the one-stop portal that the state of Kentucky has created. It's great for LLCs and corporations. Sole proprietorships do not necessarily need to use the one-stop because you don't have to actually form a formal business, nor does the general partnership. Typically, you would contact your county clerk's office if you're going to be a sole proprietorship or a general partnership. All other ones, it makes sense to go ahead and use the one-stop ky.gov portal. With the one-stop portal, one of the things I wanted to make sure that people know is that when you are filing your documents with either your articles of organization with the Secretary of State or your articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State through the one-stop portal, there is a $40 filing fee to do so. That is the minimum fee. I think the corporation has maybe a $10 fee extra, so it might be like $50 total. But there is a $40 minimum fee to file your articles of organization, which is what you're doing when you file through the one-stop portal, or your articles of organization, of corporation, sorry. Next, you want to get your employer identification number. The employer identification number, I usually tell people, think of it this way. When you form your articles of organization or your articles of incorporation, that's like your birth certificate of your business. You're letting everybody know, hey, I'm here. Well, the EIN number is like your social security number. It's the tax identification number for your company. And so it's basically what the Internal Revenue Service uses to identify your company and how to be able to understand, well, recognize your tax documents, so to speak. So you can get this identification number. You can get this free of no charge, so please do not pay for it. And you just go to the Internal Revenue Services website and you can, which is irs.gov, and you can click on employer identification number to apply for one. It takes about a minimum of 5 to 10 minutes. You will need to have your social security number, and you'll need to know how you want your business to be recognized. Like, do you want it to be a sole proprietorship, a limited liability company, or do you want it to be a corporation of some sort? And then, like I said, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to get this number. And again, you don't want to get it too soon. So you want to get it when we talked about earlier. When you expect your company to either earn some income, or you're going to hire an employee, or you're going to secure some debt, or you have to pay for a business expense of some sort. So then that one-stop portal, when you use that and make your account with the onestop.ky.gov, you will get your account and you'll keep that account because it'll be helpful as your business is in operation. But it also is very helpful when you're starting up, because you would form your articles of incorporation or your articles of organization, but then you'll also use it to register with the Kentucky Revenue Cabinet, which is where you get your state tax ID number. Now, the sole proprietors do not necessarily have to register with the Revenue Cabinet unless their particular sole proprietor is going to be responsible for collecting certain types of taxes, such as sales tax. So you don't have to register with the Revenue Cabinet if you're a sole proprietor, if you're not going to have to collect sales tax. But otherwise, all other entities do have to register with the Revenue Cabinet, and there is no fee to do so. When you register with the Revenue Cabinet, the application process is online, and what it does is it helps to identify, or determine rather, what tax accounts your particular business entity will be responsible for. Most businesses, if it's an LLC, they will be responsible for the limited liability entity tax. As well as if their business collects sales tax or is responsible for use tax. The limited liability entity tax is a tax that is paid annually to the Revenue Cabinet. The minimum tax that the state of Kentucky applies is $175. And it's paid annually, as I stated, whereas the sales tax is a quarterly tax, and it's applicable, I'm thinking 6%, 6% against your sales. So that is paid quarterly back to the Revenue Cabinet. And then also there is a use tax that is collected quarterly as well. Step 5 and 6 is your business will need to register with the city and the county. So if you're in the city of Louisville, you would register with the Metro Revenue Commission. And that is the reason why you're registering with the city, is you're going to have what's called an occupational tax. And an occupational tax basically says, I'm a business and I'm basically occupying some space in your city. So I've got to pay a tax. And so that tax is applicable, excuse me, typically it's applicable to the net profits that that business generates, or it could also be applicable to any employees, and it's a payroll tax. So a good place to check to see if your city collects a occupational tax is to use the Kentucky League of Cities website, and you'll see the link here, and you can go in to see if there is an occupational tax. Now, one thing that if your city does not collect an occupational tax, it may have what's called a business license fee that is separate from an occupational tax. A business license fee can be, usually it's applied annually, and it's a minimum fee. Sometimes I've seen some cities where they charge like $75, depending on what type of company you have. So usually what I tell people is to find out if your city has a business license fee, and that usually is applied through maybe the county clerk's office, or sometimes it's the city administrator. So you just need to kind of check. Now, in the city of Louisville, there are several smaller cities within the city of Louisville. For example, there's Shively, there's St. Matthews, there's Jeffersontown. And so these smaller cities will levy what's called an occupational tax, or they may also have a business license fee. Some of them even do both. So you just want to check with your city to see if it has an occupational tax or a business license fee. And the Kentucky League of Cities also has the counties listed. So you can look to see if your particular county has an occupational tax as well. Unfortunately, it does not track the business license fee. So you will have to check with the county that you operate within to see if there's any type of business license fee, or if the smaller city that you live in has a business license fee. So the next thing is to make sure you have the appropriate permits for what it is you're trying to do. Permits can be issued on a local level. They usually are on a local level. So you would check with your local health department if you're opening like a food related business, or maybe with the local alcohol beverage control, if there's something with alcohol, and then maybe with the animal, if it's an animal type related business, you would check with the in our case, it's the Metro Animal Services. But you want to check, a lot of times zoning offices within certain counties, they are in charge of permits. So you could check with local zoning as well. But you want to make sure that your type of business, if it needs a special type of permit. And obviously you'll need, if you're doing any type of renovations to a commercial location where people are going to be coming in, that will need to be inspected. Some in Louisville, it's the coding and regulations, but there's different state organizations that require permits as well, specific for specific parts of renovations, like for plumbing or any type of infrastructure may have to go through a state organization. Alrighty, so the next part is to make sure about special licenses. Excuse me, I'm having a problem here. So on the state level, what I usually tell people is to check the Kentucky One-Stop Business Portal. You will click on Start My Business and then look under Licenses and Permits. A lot of people are always shocked to learn, but the state of Kentucky has over 300 different types of special licenses. So you want to make sure that you get one to check to see if you need one. For example, if you handle eggs, there is an egg handler license and permit. So you want to check the one-stop portal to make sure you don't need a special license. And like I said, you can click on Start My Business on the portal and then look under Licenses and Permits. Then you want to make sure that you take care of your responsibilities as an employer. So if you are going to hire an employee, will need to make sure that you register to get your unemployment insurance accounts set up. And then you also want to make sure that you obtain your employees' Social Security number, and you want to report them to the New Hire Reporting Center, so that because there's the federal and state law requires that any new hire is reported back to the New Hire Reporting Center. And then you want to make sure that you get workers' compensation for each one of your employees. And you can do that by going through your insurance agent. And then again, there's more for when you hire an employee. So I usually tell people to go back to the onestop.koi.gov and look under Operate My Business and read up on the information on employees, because there's certain posters that you need to post. There's other obligations that you have to be aware that you are responsible for and should be aware of. And this particular web link will give you more information about their other obligations. Next, you want to establish your business bank account. As you remember earlier, I said that when you do structure your business, a business has its own assets. And so one of the assets that a business has is cash, which is in the form of their business bank account. So you want to make sure that your company has a bank account in the company name under their EIN number. And so a business bank account, it helps you to remain legally compliant, and it also helps to provide benefits to you and your customers when you're working with them. And also for your merchant service accounts, it makes it a lot easier for you to accept credit and debit cards from your customers. So you want to make sure that you get your business checking account set up. You want to make sure that, again, you've got the proper paperwork. So you'll need your business formation documents. So if you are an LLC, that means a copy of your articles of organization. And then some banks will even ask for your governing document, which is an operating agreement in this case. And so if there's any ownership agreements that are applicable to your business, you want to make sure you have that. And then some banks will also ask for the business license if there is one that's needed. And of course, you'll need your employer identification number. So you want to make sure that you have those documents ready for the bank account that you choose. Now, business insurance is the last step that you want to make sure that your company has. It is something that at the minimum you want to have business liability insurance, but there might be, you might need rental insurance for the property that you're renting, or you may have to be responsible for property insurance. You may want to have theft insurance to protect against theft in your business or fire. So talk to your insurance provider that you work with, and they can tell them exactly what it is that your business does and what you hope to do. And they can kind of give you some good recommendations on a policy. You might even look into what's called an umbrella policy, where you've got more than one type of coverage. So you want to make sure that you have the appropriate business insurance for your business. Now we're going to talk about some basic starting things you want to think about for export or importing for your business. So what I usually ask people is, why do you want to export or import? Do you understand the industry that you're getting involved in? That's key, because the industry may act one way in what you're used to in your country or in your home country, but it may act totally different into the country you want to either export or import into. So you want to make sure that you take some time to understand what type of, what's the industry you want to be involved in, and how you hope to interact in that industry. How many competitors are there in the industry? Who are some of the bigger competitors that you have to deal with? What are some of the barriers for getting involved in this industry? Are there things like tariffs? Are there sanctions that I would have to deal with? Are there any type of restrictive trade practices? Are there things that are non-barriers, such as quotas that you have to have or deal with? Where this is where the government, they put like certain limitations on what can be imported into their country. And then are there certain specific industry standards that you would have to meet? Like, do I have to meet with the CE mark? Or are there any things that the USDA or the US Food Administration, Food and Drug Administration require? So you want to kind of understand what are some of the things that I, as a business, would have to deal with. And then you want to think about who is the customer that you are trying to sell to. Am I trying to sell to a distributor? Am I trying to sell in stores directly? Or am I trying to sell directly to a customer? Those all have different modes of entry, and they all have different ways. There's different payment options involved in that. And so you have to kind of understand who your customer is and why you're going after that customer. And then you need to think about the political issues that the country may have, or any cultural differences that you may have to contend with, and then also the economic environment. Those things can all play a role in how you are able to export or import. And then we've already talked about the barriers to entry, which are basically like sanctions, tariffs, embargoes, and things of that nature. They can be barriers, but there's also non-barriers such as quotas, or product specifications or things of that nature. And then you also have to keep in mind that real knowledge is going to be more powerful for you. Your product, a lot of times you want to import or export a product, and you may not know like how do I put it, how to get that product from, a supplier or a vendor to be able to export it to someone. So you have to kind of know more about what's required to get your hands, so to speak, on that product to be able to sell it, right? And then you want to understand, like, in that country that you want it to go into, will I have to do some packaging changes to the product? Some countries, they require bilingual, packaging. They want more than one language on their packaging. So you have to kind of think about that as well. And then the product that you want to sell, can you sell it at the price, at a profit where, the competition may be able to undercut you? So you have to kind of think about those things as well. And then you have to think about the quality control for what you're trying to do, like just to get that product out the door, and then, making sure that it ends up looking the way that you want it to look when it ends up in the end user's hand. There's a lot of steps in between there. So you have to make sure that you are maintaining your quality control. And of course, there's legal requirements. So you have to kind of think about, will my product need a license? What other documents will I need to have in order to be able to get the product out the door? So I always think about a client that I shouldn't say always, but I think about this client that I dealt with a while back. They wanted to export a product, and to them it was an innocent product, but it turned out to be alcohol, right? No big deal, right? So they're like, I'm not the export of record, and it's coming out of a different country. And well, come to find out, they needed an export license. They needed to report certain things to the Customs Border Patrol. And so they ended up getting fined quite a bit. And their product actually never got to the destination because it got to the destination, but it didn't get picked up by the customer, for lack of a better word. So they had to end up getting it shipped back. So I had to pay that. So there's a lot of legal requirements. And so you want to kind of take that into consideration as well. And then the payment process, there's different ways to get paid. And so, you have your letter of credit, you have cash in advance, there's all different types of payments processes that are in between. And so you want to make sure you understand what type of payment process should you be using for the type of customer that you would like to buy your product from you. So lastly, it takes a lot of commitment, you all. You want to be willing to commit some time, your own time, be willing to commit the right type of labor to make sure that you are getting the product out the door the right way. And then it does take some cash or capital to be able to move the product, whether it's importing or exporting. So you want to make sure that you're willing to commit those things before you jump into it. So I'm going to say thank you for your time. Do we have any questions in the chat right now?
So we do not have any questions at the moment, but thank you so much, Tony, for that overview of how you start a business and the entire process. Just a reminder, everyone, if you have a question about starting a business here in Kentucky, you can send those in the chat or in the Q&A section. And as mentioned, this is a two-part seminar. The first part will be discussing about starting a business specifically, as Tony was just giving us an overview. And the second part will go more in depth on the considerations that you need to keep in mind, as you start to import or export. So now we're going to have a few questions for Tony, David, and Brian to kind of learn a little bit more about, the business, registration and development process. And Tony, you sort of talked about the tax and legal implications and the protections that come with having that business. And then you also talked about obtaining a business insurance. And I think, could you go a little bit more about the distinction between, what are the protections that come with having a legal entity as a business and the protections that come with having a business insurance?
Excellent question. So if you decide to become a legal entity such as an LLC or an S corporation or a general corporation, which is also called a C corp, those types of entities, what they do is provide protection up to a certain point against certain liabilities, as well as so what that means is that the company is responsible for the liabilities. Now, I always have been taught, and an attorney taught this to me. He said, Tony, there's no perfect entity that gives you 100% protection. Okay. So what some things that you want to do to try to help that protection is you want to make sure you have the insurance. Okay. Your business should have some actual assets. Assets are things like equipment. It could be your maybe you've got a vehicle in the company's name, or you've got a building, or maybe even a logo of some sort. Okay, so it has to have some actual assets. It has to have a banking account. Okay, as part of that identity. One thing you do not want to do is you don't want to mix cash. Okay, so what that means is don't just, because the company is making money, don't just use the checking account from the company to pay your personal cable bill. Okay, and believe it or not, I've had people do that. So you don't want to do that. You want to do what I call an owner's draw, right? Or maybe you even get a salary out of the company and you use that money to pay your bill. Okay. And then also, you don't want to sign a personal guarantee if you can avoid it, because the personal guarantee kind of opens the door for somebody to come after your personal assets when you have a legal entity such as an LLC or an S corp. And I hope that answered your question. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to turn now to Brian and David. So Tony was talking about the protections that come with starting a business, and to move more towards starting to import or export. So what are the differences between importing or exporting as an individual versus a business? Either of you could start.
Yeah, sure thing. As from an importing perspective, as an individual, you can import, and as a business, you can import. So either you have the authority to import as an individual. You don't need to have a business per se, but it is easier to import, if you have a business number and you have, if you're an individual and you're paying duties and taxes, then you would need some kind of ID or business number to pay those duties and taxes on. Say you get something from overseas, it's a big shipment and you have to pay the US government, then you would need some kind of ID, or you need a social security number in that range to pay the government. As a business, it's a little bit easier. You'd use your EIN or business number to import, but you can do it. It doesn't take a special license. In some cases it does if you're importing certain goods, but if you guys think of all the stuff people order on Amazon.com, some of it comes from China, some of it comes from everywhere. So it's pretty easy to get the importing game. And on Thursday, we'll talk a lot about these specific techniques to try to make it easier for you to import and reduce your risk a little bit.
So I would add or echo what David says, with regards to exporting, as an individual. If you're exporting, a small amount of product for personal use, in other words, you're shipping something to a family member or a friend, those are things that are fairly straightforward. Making sure obviously that the items aren't controlled. And Tony touched on this to some extent. Items that are controlled are items that are not controlled in the fact of having to have a business license, but they're controlled by the U.S. government in the sense that they are considered either truly a military type item or a dual use item, meaning the U.S. government has determined that those particular products have potentially some dangerous capacity or dangerous nature, depending on what the product is, what market you're selling it to, and who you're selling it to. So provided you don't run into any of those areas of concern, shipping a small amount as an individual typically is not an issue. If it's a situation where obviously you are selling those products, then you're essentially doing this as a business. And for legal reasons, obviously you should be duly registered within the state of Kentucky or whatever state that you've incorporated in. And so, in that situation, it's a matter of keeping track of the books, obviously. And as Tony said, not crossing over, things that you're selling through your business and putting the funds into your personal banking account. So, and again, as Dave said, we'll talk a bit more detail on this on Thursday, but typically no major issues, especially on small amounts of things. But when you start doing larger volumes, then you better have a business registration registered in place, because at some point somebody's going to notice that you're shipping 10 container loads a year of different, they're going to wonder how big your family is or how many friends you have in a certain market. So yeah, just be aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And so just staying in the sort of protection piece of this whole thing, Tony talked about like permits that are required by the state. And she also touched on some permits that may be required for a certain products if you are importing or exporting internationally. Could you share a little bit more about where, if a specific individual or business wants to start importing or exporting and they don't know whether they need a permit or not, how would they find that out? Where can they get that type of information?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of ways you can get it. A lot of times, you could even contact the company that's your forwarder if you're using a forwarder, it's not hand carried through like a family member or something. If you're using a shipping company, a forwarder, they can be a resource for you. You gotta make sure you're really clear up front what you're importing. If you have a customs broker, they can help you out. But you need to plan all this before you do it, because once it gets in the air or on the rail, you can't undo something like that. But Amos, to your point, say you're trying to import something like some kind of food product. There could be some regulations that govern that food product that you don't know, and CBP might detain it. So these are the things you need to get up front. And again, if you have a shipping company you're working with, a UPS, or if you have a customs broker, or these organizations like Louisville First might be able to help you, point you in the right direction. So there's a lot of resources out there. Everybody has their own favorite person they talk to, but in coming to this seminar, I think that you guys are developing some contacts and knowing the right people to contact to get this kind of information.
So Amos, again, I'll echo some of David's remarks as well. From the export side of the equation, documentary issues or documentary requirements, can vary certainly country by country and by product category that you're shipping. There's some basic export documents that are going to be required regardless. If you're selling product, commercial invoice, you have to file what's called under AES, which is essentially a shipper's export declaration. That's how customs authorities around the world track products that are coming in and out of a country. There are sometimes requirements of a certificate of free sale. You have some markets that require more detailed documentation, again, based on the market. There's a few markets in the Middle East that require documentation to be notarized through various steps, if you will, by the embassies of those markets in Washington, D.C. before you can ship. If you're shipping to a market that has a free trade agreement with the U.S., you obviously want to be able to, if required, provide the appropriate documentation that notes that your product is made in the U.S. So that your buyer, whoever's collecting the product in country, if it's a free trade agreement country, so we have a bilateral trade agreement with, if that product comes in duty free, obviously your buyer wants to be able to collect that product duty free so that they're not having to pay additional tariffs or taxes upon those. So including those types of things, those are again, they're going to vary country by country. We've got roughly 20 countries that the United States has free trade agreements with. Some require specialized forms, if you will, to submit as far as the free trade agreement. Others do not. Others have a very a more I won't say lax approach, but it can be just on company letterhead sort of thing versus a very sort of strict formal documentation. As far as documents that are required for those controlled items that I had mentioned earlier, that's an entirely different process. I don't want to get too deep a dive on that. Again, we'll talk a bit more about it on Thursday, but those are much more of a process. Those are products that you have to get the appropriate documentation from the appropriate U.S. federal agencies to even begin thinking about shipping it. If you don't have it or don't have it in place, it probably will never even make it to customs of the inbound customs of the customer or who you're selling it to. It'll get stopped by outbound customs in the United States if it doesn't have the appropriate license to be able to ship like that for those dual use or potentially dangerous items.
And I just wanted to add that the Small Business Development Center works with the U.S. Commercial Service and the World Trade Center to help people with getting the export documentation compliance, documents together and helping them we give them guidance in those areas. So a lot of times when people are starting out, we can kind of say, these are the things you would be responsible for, and, and kind of help you to understand your, the documentation, and it's available at no cost.
Yeah, I think from hearing from all three of you, it's fair to say that if you are beginning to think about importing and exporting, it is probably your best bet to get an advisor, like somebody from the Small Business Development Center, who can walk you through the entire process. Tony, you quality control measures, and could you share a little bit more about where you can find that information? Like what are the requirements for each product?
As the gentleman kind of stated, it's kind of a lot of different places that you would get it from.
Tony,
So
you control measures, just products.
I'm so sorry. Can you all hear me?
I can hear you, Tony. I had trouble hearing Amos a little bit, though.
Yeah, Amos, you broke up a little bit there.
Okay. Well, so there's a number of different agencies that an exporter or an importer may have to deal with. So it's basically some of the organizations could be like the USDA or the US Food and Drug Administration on an exporting side. And then as Brian was stating, that if a country may require certain things to be notarized, so you might have to go to a chamber or some sort to get a notary. So it just depends. But what we do at the SBDC is we can kind of help them to be aware of what they're responsible for.
Great, thank you for that. And I think the question for all three of you actually is, so let's say I'm not a US citizen. What considerations do I need to think of, or am I eligible to start a business or start importing or exporting?
So one of the things that you do have to have certain documentations. As I stated earlier, you would need like a social security number for your EIN number. So if you don't have that, you do have the ability to either get an E2 treaty investor classification, and then or an EB5, which is a visa classification. And so you would work with an attorney to get either one of those. But if you're not a US citizen, you have to have either one of those ways to go the US citizen pathway.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and again, with regards to everything Tony said, obviously, that's the case for, there's plenty of people here in the United States that are not U.S. citizens that have businesses. They may be on the path to citizenship, which takes time, but they have businesses and they're active exporters. And this happens regularly, providing they're doing all the appropriate steps, as Tony said, to obtain the appropriate Social Security numbers or EINs for their companies. Look, the U.S. government, by and large, just does not have issue with individuals or companies that are doing things properly and doing it by the book, the way they're supposed to be doing it, and being an active company, an active contributor to the economy, supporting jobs, those sort of things. They certainly even like to see that. It's just a matter of making sure that you're doing it, by the book and doing it appropriately. You're doing it, under the books, if you will, without having the appropriate documentation. That's an area where you can certainly get in trouble.
Yeah, and I know we will discuss a little bit more in detail on Thursday about these, importing and exporting considerations. But Brian, since you sort of were already in this market prior to joining the U.S. Commercial Services, if somebody's thinking of exporting something they patented, what legal considerations do they have to think about?
So with regards to patents, trademarks, copyrights, those sort of things, if a company here domestically, files for those, whether something is patent pending or when they've received a patent, it depends, obviously on the level in which you want to potentially enforce your intellectual property protection in an overseas market. There's no such thing as an international patent. There are patent regimes in place that allow you to simultaneously file a patent in, I think, roughly 90 countries at once. There's one of them, and there's another one for trademarks as well, that allows you to simultaneously file. But all you are in doing that sense is filing for the patent or the trademark. You still have to go through the process of any of those markets that if you ultimately do decide you want to move forward with, you still have to go through a similar process you have here in the US of having a patent examiner review it, see if there's something, that it could be infringing on an existing patent in that particular market that you're selling into, or is it something that they'll even patent. It may not be that there's a patent or even a trademark on something in that particular market, but it may be a product that's already been sold in that market for many years, and it's in the open marketplace, and then you have, basically little to no chance to obtain that. It's an expensive process. I have to be honest with you. It's expensive and time consuming, even here domestically, if you're filing for things here in the US. But if you're filing for things overseas, I always encourage my clients to really dig deep and think about markets that they really think are going to potentially offer long-term growth, the right return on investment, and then evaluate whether or not you're willing to go the enforcement route if someone does infringe upon it. Look, IP protection it's a very challenging thing. There's a lot of companies that deal with this every day, that they're selling into a market. They may even be selling product to a distributor overseas, and that distributor is then unfortunately figuring out ways to reverse engineer or create a product that's very similar or the same, and then ultimately take your idea and start making their own, and we see it regularly. To give you an example, I remember I remember being in a trade show in Germany. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, it was no, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I can't remember now if it was no, it was. Can't remember if it was Germany or it was China. Forgive me, but it was a very large U.S. multinational that manufacture a product in a lot of different industry sectors, and obviously I can't say their name, but one of the companies that they used as a contractor to manufacture parts for them had literally taken and this company, their partner, had a display as well on this massive show, this trade show floor, and they had taken product that they were making for the U.S. company, and even with the same serial number, were selling that same exact product in their catalog as their own product as well. And the U.S. company saw this as they walked the show floor, and they came to us and asked us to approach the company and explain that this is, copyright and patent infringement. And they had, and we went with the show organizers to the booth of this overseas manufacturer and explained to them that they had, a half an hour or an hour to remove everything that was infringement from not only from their booth, but also from every catalog and every piece of literature that they were handing out. And so this company, not only did they lose the business at the trade show because of this, but they also, of course, lost their major deal that they had with the U.S. company that they were manufacturing for. It all went south pretty quick. So, look, it's important to remember that a patent is essentially a license to sue, and that's really what it is in the end. If you have deep enough pockets and are willing to stomach it and gut it out and go the protection route, whether it's domestic or overseas, you can certainly do that. But it's not an easy process. A lot of times brand protection is oftentimes more important because patents can be easily worked around and stolen. Whereas if you have a brand that you create, and a lot of times first in wins, if you will. And so if you go in and you file for trademarks and you kind of become the default choice or the default a known quantity of, as far as a manufacturer selling that product in the market, you oftentimes have more protection in that sense than someone who steals your patent and then trying to enforce or go after them in a court in a foreign market.
Yeah, I think, but rightly there, I think the theme that we've heard here, especially with internationally selling and purchasing, is that there's a lot of considerations and agencies. John here sent a comment saying that exporting often does require interacting with different agencies. He's sharing about exporting wood construction mats to Canada, and the process included working with the USDA, ensuring that the wood components meet the international standards. So I think we have several questions from participants. Somebody here asks about digital products. How would one go about finding out the regulations that are in place, like privacy laws or the language requirements?
Yeah, are they talking about from the importing side or the exporting side?
Not anyone necessarily, but I think sharing from both sides would be great. David and Brian.
Okay, I see a thing that says popped up, says export. So if that's your request, so I'll say from the export side of it, look, there are major considerations from privacy laws now that are well, I'll take the EU for example. Canada has very strong privacy laws. Even our agency, in which my counterparts that are posted in the U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. In these markets where they've enacted privacy laws, my contacts cannot send an email to a company unsolicited on behalf of another U.S. company that's looking to get into the market. Companies that we work with, where we're trying to do business to business matchmaking. So there's extensive laws that are in play. My counterparts have to pick up the phone and speak with someone if they're willing to speak with them, and then request that they allow the U.S. Embassy to send emails to these companies about prospective U.S. companies that are looking to enter the market. So there's major movement in a lot of markets for these privacy laws. Here in the United States, we don't have that so much. That's why we all get the robocalls about our car warranty expiring about 5 times a day. But it's very different in a lot of other markets about the approach. So it's I'll be honest, I don't know one blanket resource that just tells you where things are, but I'm sure that there are a number of resources out there that explain what the privacy laws are on various countries, and then keep in mind it's a moving target because more and more markets are evaluating that option.
David, what about reporting?
I'm sorry, go ahead, Amos.
I was asking David if he can speak a little bit to the importing side of digital products.
Sure thing. Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of a mirror image of what Brian has said, about the laws, or the U.S. laws are, similar to international on that front. So just kind of a mirror image.
I think Amos.
I think you're muted almost.
Do you hear me now?
Okay, we got you.
Yeah, I apologize. I'm having some internet issues here. Thank you both for that. I think Daniel has a follow-up question for Dinah. What if they want to ship different things based on what the customer wants, such as clothes or home products or canned food? Can I do that instead of exporting only one specific product?
So, I mean, yeah, as a company, and we'll talk about this in more detail, on Thursday, whether you're a manufacturer of products or whether you're a distributor of products, something that you have access to. There's nothing that says you can't export. I mean, you can export a complete array of any product, that you want. If it's something that you're a distributor and you have access to, clothing, to home goods, to foods, to jewelry, to any kind of manufactured item, even to services, there's nothing that would stop you from being able to have a portfolio of products that you would sell or could sell into a market, other than the things we talked about earlier with regards to some of the regulatory issues that are in place, both domestic as well as the overseas importing country. Now, I will say that you definitely want to play to your strengths. And sometimes there's the aspect of, you can't see the forest for the trees. And over the years, I've seen plenty of companies that they're looking at every different thing, every different option of things to export, instead of really focusing on where their core expertise or their core, the core products that they have access to at the right value proposition to be able to sell into. They get too spread out on too many different things, and then oftentimes it ends up being a failure because they've tried too many things and not focused, at least initially, on one or two, major items that offer them the strongest either return on investment or the area of product lines that the most. If if you know clothing and fashion, and that's what you have access to, major suppliers here domestically, then maybe that's what you focus on. If you're selling clothing, and then you got somebody that wants to buy, food products, they're pretty divergent. There's nothing that stops you from selling it. Both those things together, but where is your comparative advantage? I mean, if you spread yourself too thin because you've got so many different products in your portfolio of items, it can get messy pretty quickly. And I see a lot of companies fail because of that, because they try too many different things.
Yeah, actually, David and Tony, so you have all of these considerations on your sort of the domestic side of things, let's say in Kentucky, for example. But once you import a product into the state, I guess, should you only be considering those sort of national regulations from the, for example, U.S. Commercial Service or, customs, or are there any considerations that you would need to consider domestically, specifically at the state level?
State level. Yeah, usually, I mean, you're getting something from overseas, it's interstate commerce if you move it, but it's more of a national regulations. There's nothing I know of that's like a state regulation for getting something in here, unless Tony knows something I don't know. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just a national regulations you're dealing with, U.S. Customs.
He's correct. It's just that if you're if you're selling a food product, you want to make sure that you go through the U.S. DA, depending on what type of food it is, and then like if you're selling to restaurants or something like that particular, like I had a guy who was importing fish from Africa, country in Africa, I can't remember which one, and so he had to make sure that he on a national level connected with the USDA as well as the Custom Border Patrol. And then because of the way he was selling it, we just checked with the Office of Public Health locally to make sure there was no issues. So usually there's nothing state or local once you get it here.
If you're operating like a restaurant or something, you're licensed through like the local area, right? Isn't that right, Tony? Like you're that way?
Correct. And that's why I said we just check just to make sure. I'm one of those people that let them tell and instead of them coming to find you and telling So, I believe you should check it out first. But usually there's nothing state or local that you have to worry about once you import it over here.
Okay, and it's about being safe, both at the national and state level. I think the next question, I think you all could answer this, and maybe each of you could touch on this. When considering packaged goods from the U.S., when you're exporting, can someone get by with a pallet label in the native language of the country of destination, or would they need the language of the country of the destination on each individual package besides English on each label?
Almost forgive me. It was breaking up there a bit, so I didn't hear totally everything that you said.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So when considering packaged goods, can somebody get by with a label in the native language of the country of destination?
Yeah, he's just saying on the pallet, Brian. So if you just had like a pallet marking and say you had like 10 boxes, you would just mark the pallet.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, if you're talking about from the exporting side, again, it's going to vary from country to country as far as what the regs are. But by and large, most countries, especially, first of all, foodstuffs, things that you ingest or eat, they're typically going to require everything to be translated into the language of the country that's the importing country. Not only the ingredients to be translated, but oftentimes, obviously, is here we use calories, and a lot of other countries, they use different formats for valuations of they use kilocalories or energy, if you will. Those things would need to be translated as well. If you're talking about products that are consumer goods, that are things that you potentially would be plugging in or using in your home, that if done or used improperly or incorrectly, those would need to be translated as well. So if you think about it, and Dave, forgive me, I don't want to steal something on the importing side, but in most situations, if you look at things which you import, or just not even import, you just go and buy it off the shelf at a store, at Target or wherever it is. The majority of those things may not be made here, but the language in which the directions are or the labeling is English. So you're dealing with a similar situation. And so it would be, typically it's going to be based on obviously the country that you're sending it to. So yeah, unfortunately, translation of labeling and branding and marketing and things like that would need to be in the appropriate language of the importing country.
Yeah, I just think about it. If you're bringing stuff in on a pallet and those boxes get separated, how are you going to know what country they're from? U.S. marketing laws are pretty severe if you're importing, as far as everything needs to be marked in native language, and the written law is everything has to be marked unless it can't be marked, if that makes sense. Like if you buy fruits and vegetables at Walmart or Kroger, you'll see the little sticker on like a pear or something like that, or maybe that's a bad example, but some guava or something comes international. So everything has to be marked down to the lowest level it can be marked. If it physically can't be marked, then you've got to have an excuse, like nuts, bolts, and screws can't be marked when they come in here, but anything of any substance has to be marked.
Yeah. Actually, staying on the language side, Tony, could you share sort of at the SPDC, do you have services for language access for those who are not native English speakers?
We can arrange that, but we don't have it like in our office, but we can arrange for that. Yes. If it's available, I'll put it that way. We can arrange for it.
Okay, so the next question is specific to Peru, and they're asking, do you have some resources or contacts for getting coffee tested properly once it lands in the U.S. At the U.S. port?
I don't have a specific contact or anything. I just spent a few minutes looking up online. I see there's a number of labs. There's Coffee Quality Lab and a few other labs that are popping up on my screen right now. That looks like it's pretty easy to get tests from. But I don't have a contact. It's the industry I don't deal in typically, but it looks like there's a decent amount of people out there that'll do it for you.
Amos?
Yes.
I just want to make sure you were talking about earlier where somebody comes to use our services to have someone to translate, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Yeah, and staying on that side, I think sort of as we finish up the conversation for today, I think the common theme that we've seen here is that there's such a lot of complexities and many considerations to keep in mind, before you start thinking about importing or exporting, before you start creating a business. And I think it's very valuable to have the contacts that we have here in the city, David, Brian, and Tony, and the teams that you work with. And I would encourage our participants to really reach out to these various business organizations and companies if you are considering starting a business or starting to import or export. And I think to kind of end things here, because I know we'll share out resources, a glossary of vocabulary that to keep in mind as you think about international trade. But I wanted to give each one of you a few minutes to kind of talk about the organizations that you work with and what services are available to individuals. If we can start with Brian, maybe, and then David. Return.
So I must say, just to be clear, are you asking what our organizations are, or organizations that we sort of work with or have access to?
Yes, so the organizations that you work with, for example, U.S. Commercial Services, and what resources are available to them, what services are available to individuals and are available to individuals and citizens. Sure. Okay. So, you know, to give the elevator pitch, if you will, a background of our agency. So the agency that I work for is called U.S. and Foreign Commercial Service. Or a lot of times on the domestic side here in the U.S., they just call it U.S. Commercial Service. We're an agency of the U.S. Department of Commerce under the umbrella of the International Trade Administration. And we are the trade and investment section for all the U.S. embassies and consulates around the world. So we've got a presence in about 85 countries, about 145 U.S. embassies and consulates. We've got about 100 offices domestically, and really our mission is to help small to medium sized companies, small to medium enterprises that don't have, you know, these large international departments, if you will, these companies are looking to develop sales opportunities overseas. Everything we focus on is on the export side of the equation. We don't do anything with regards to importing at all. But for small companies, small to medium-sized companies, we do everything from market research, you know, the market intel to understand markets of opportunity or markets to steer clear of, if you will. A lot of what we do is business to business matchmaking, connecting you with overseas distributors or representatives, or in some cases end users. And when I say end users, if it's consumer goods, we're not going to, you know, connect you with end users in that situation. It would be distributors or representatives, but end users is someone is selling things that are that there's a very small number of prospective buyers, you know, companies that are selling to, say, you know, a foreign military, or you know, say they're selling, you know, X-ray equipment or MRI equipment, you know, to you know, a group of hospitals that maybe there's only, you know, a half a dozen hospitals in a particular market, if you will, that would be a prospect. You know, those would be end users in that standpoint. But everything that we do, again, ultimately is to help connect foreign companies with, U.S. companies with foreign partners overseas that are ultimately potential buyers or distributors for your product. And also, you know, we do help companies, you know, considerably with understanding the regulatory aspects of being able to sell into a market, not just the U.S. regs as they apply to, you know, a product category that you sell, but also to the foreign country, you know, the importing country where your customer is, to understand what those regs are. So we do due diligence reports to make sure, or to help you understand who you're doing business with. You know, it's you'd like to think it's always a, you know, purely trusting world, that everything's on the up and up, but there's a whole lot of companies get a lot of emails from a lot of different places that, you know, are interested in buying, you know, your product, when in actuality it's completely fraudulent, and you do have to be extremely careful, you know, those sort of things. So we work to help companies vet overseas prospects, if you will. So it kind of runs the gamut of what we do. We focus on every industry sector you could possibly imagine. And you know, we work with businesses from, you know, the smallest operations and all the way up to Fortune 500 companies that do come to us. They're tax paying companies as well. And, you know, and as that goes, they come to us when, you know, they have an advocacy issue. There's a major impediment to some sort of,
bid, say, if you will. It's a company or a country puts out a bid for, buying airplanes, and the bid is written in a way that it favors Airbus and it unfairly doesn't allow Boeing to have a fair shot. And so, we work on those advocacy type things, but again, primarily it's dealing with the small to medium sized companies to help them understand, and not just understand who prospective customers are, but to help them understand whether or not exporting is right for them or right for them at this particular point in time, because it's exporting is something that's going to take more of everything. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's going to take more capital. It's going to take more human resources. It's going to take more time. And your largest potential market that you have is right here in the United States. And while I say that, and everything that we do is trying to encourage companies to export, it would be a disservice to tell companies or try to encourage companies that aren't ready or aren't right or don't have the right product or whatever it may be, that to try to encourage them to shift their time and effort and resources toward targeting an overseas market when they haven't. They either don't have a domestic track record and selling here. So we help companies make those decisions as well. We help them ask the hard questions internally.
They do a great job. As someone, I work for the World Trade Center, Kentucky, and U.S. Commercial Services are there to support you. And he is actually a Department of Commerce employee. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, so he's a government guy, but well, I tell you what, they do a great job for us. World Trade Center, that's what I work for, and we do educational programs. We have a lot of companies, our member companies, they join together, and we provide educational services, the basics, export 101, import 101s. We help people get started, and that's our mission is to promote trade. Our logo is "We Grow Trade," I think, and that's just what we're here to do. But mostly it's an educational organization. We go on site and do seminars, and we help small companies and get started. So that's the gist of what we do at the World Trade Center, Kentucky.
So the Kentucky Small Business.
I'm not sure about business. I'm sorry, Tony.
Oh no, are you okay? So
Can
the
you hear me?
Kentucky. Yes, sir. Is it okay if you want me to go ahead and go?
I think he wanted you to go ahead and
Yeah, go ahead. I think I'll allow David there next on Thursday.
Okay. So I just wanted to let you all know that the Kentucky Small Business Development Center is a network of 17 offices throughout the state of Kentucky. We all, provide at no cost to you what's called technical assistance. And so our services are geared towards helping help you start your business, or to fund your business, or to even grow your business. And so what that means is we can help you with things such as your business plan. We can help you with your loan packaging. We can help provide you with startup advice. We also, on the export-import side, we can help you to get export ready. We provide insight on that. And so we work with the World Trade Center and collaborate with the U.S. Commercial Services to help provide these services to people. So our services are available to you at no cost. And we are in 17 offices throughout the state of Kentucky.
Almost, if I can add one thing, that, locally and regionally and statewide, we're quite lucky here to have an enormous amount of resources, in the World Trade Center, in the SBDCs, in the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development, in Louisville Forward, in our agency, and everybody seems to play well together, and we play to our strengths. And so, I think for companies that are looking to export or import, areas where our specific agencies can assist, we will, and where areas where you're better served at a particular point in time with one of the other trade partners, on this call or elsewhere, we're going to refer you to the appropriate party that's going to be able to help you the most. And so I think for, one of the takeaways for a lot, for the companies that are on here is to know that the resources are vast and there's lots of experience, and because everyone again plays well in the sandbox together, if we can't answer it or one of the other groups can't answer it, we're going to refer you to the appropriate one that can.
Yes, no, thank you so much, you all, for really, agreeing to convene here and just share this vast, amount of knowledge and experiences that you have. And for the participants, thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions that were not answered in this seminar, join us on Thursday at the same time at 10 a.m. Where we'll hear more from David and Brian on the importing process and exporting process, just like, we heard from Tony on starting your business. I'm gonna give you an extra 4 minutes back into your schedules, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amos, for organizing. We appreciate everything. Thank y'all.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for hosting, Tony. It's great.
Mm.